So let's get back and ready for the next hands that are going to come, and the chat has been going wild. And national sports like Austria skiing, and I believe it's about alpine skiing because I can't remember any famous Austrian skiers. That wouldn't be like alpine skiers or ski jumpers. And now I'm going to get so much blame. And even this 8-10 suited, if I think that the opponents would be good, I could shove this, but I'm thinking that I'm going to get called way too often. As Kifosi said, like, what other kind of skiing is there? Like the kind of skiing that you are skiing from one place to another and not using machinery to get to other places and then gravity to get back. And I think like the difference between the Russian drinking and the British drinking is going to be that in Britain it's going to be beer, and the stereotype here would be that in Russia it's going to be vodka. And you'll all know what's going to happen. I was actually pretty surprised that practically every Finn hates skiing. Like, you need to do it in school, in the army, everywhere. You'll need to do the boring kind of skiing. Like, I must agree with Skyphosis that alpine skiing, it's fun. But regular skiing, usually not so much. But I was surprised when I moved to Estonia when friends in Estonia are like, it's going to be great that it's winter, that you can do the regular kind of skiing. And I was like, what? I just couldn't comprehend it at first. But like the regular kind of skiing is bigger in here than it's in Finland. And Skyphosis said that, yeah, but Finns are better in regular skiing, right? I think it's going to be like the geography lesson. Like, in Finland, there are not a lot of mountains. In Austria, there are a lot of mountains, and there are high places that you can go and ski down from. But in Finland, there are very few places that are going to be high and you could ski for a long time. So it's going to be the alpine skiing. It's concentrated on parts of Finland that don't have that much population. So it's going to be something that there are not that many people that, even if they would want to, could afford or could go to skiing, alpine skiing, and practice it regularly. Marcus Y says that drinking vodka is like skiing, that you are moving from one place to another. I once drank vodka in Lithuania and woke up in Estonia. That's good. Actually, it was in the news a while ago that a German guy in Lapland went drinking, and then there were like only path of footsteps to the forest, and he went missing, and he was found like one day later, something like 130 kilometers away, with no reconciliation how he got there. Pocket aces, not good enough today. I think for a country to be good at something would be, it's mainly a function of how many people are taking the sport up. Like something like curling is going to be that Canada is always going to win pretty much all the world championships because I think half of this or more than half of the serious curling enthusiasts are in Canada. So they are going to win all the championships anyway. I'm thinking the same is going to be for something like table tennis, that if most of the serious enthusiasts are in China, then China is going to win most of the time. And it's going to be like how available is a certain sport and for getting the serious enthusiasts in the sport. And like in Finland, the problem is that you are having snow everywhere, so you can ski, and especially in the northern parts of Finland, you can ski for a long time. But for alpine skiing, it's going to be much harder to get a much harder to get into it, and it's probably something like why soccer is going to be, or is such a great sport, that you don't need the whole stadium to have fun with it. But with something like ice hockey, you are requiring a rink, and you are requiring good ice to be good at it. But something like football, you can just get a ball and get a street corner or some place that has grass on it, and just start playing and practicing. Good eyes or good ice? Ice. And Rixie says, can you HRC quick analyze this at the end to see how you do it? We can do some quick analysis at the end. An impact point, it's going to be like, it doesn't matter if you have invented football, but the problem with football is that if you are having people that are serious about football, the junior players, they are just going to be so much more enthusiast junior players in countries that are having bigger populations. I think that's going to be something like why South America has been done really well, because there are a lot of juniors that are living for football. But that doesn't explain why Germany is so good at football. And this is going to be somewhat frustrating that we got games from $0.5 to $30. And what is the game that we are finishing with? It's the $0.5 45 player turbo. And when Jack is shoving, I don't think that we can call here with much. There are still going to be risk premium involved. Impact point. Does HRC or IC Miser have different settings for different speed formats? I don't think that they would have, because there is like mathematically the speed doesn't matter. In here, pocket 10s is going to be way too good to fold. Something like pocket 8s and ace queen or better would be a call here against Jack's range. And we are not even angry about this Diegosmes winning, because I think the best player apart from ourselves lost chips here, so the chips are going to be easier to get from these other players. And we gained some chips there anyway, because Diegosmes had such a short stack. And now we have his hand, and we are trying to get... Like, this Dicholo has been 3-betting a lot, and he's going to be a pest post-flop, and when we are having aces, we don't worry about pests post-flop. We are just betting and being happy that we are having them on the table. If he calls, it's going to be good. If he doesn't, it's going to be a bit sad, but still, we are getting the chip lead here. But like impact point, it's going to be your responsibility of adjusting the ranges. Like IC Miser and Hold'em Resources Calculator, they are calculating like the ranges that those softwares are going to come up with are going to be ranges if everybody would play like perfect push fold or perfect min raise to 3-bet to shove or 3-bet shove poker with no other options to play the hand. And in these games it's going to be more of a difference. I think the most of the differences for the certain stack size are going to be about what are the default ranges going to be for a player at turbos, and what's the default range going to be for a player at the normal speed. And I think like normal speed players are going to limp more, and they are going to be less aggressive pre-flop, and they are also, when you are getting short stacked, the normal speed players are going to be tighter to call your shoves at most of the opportunities, because they have had less practice for shove and fold. Impact Point said that surely your range should change if it's 10-minute blind level or 2-minute blind level. In general, it doesn't affect that much, and it's something that would be hard to calculate on, like when is going to be the next rise in blinds. So, like the ICM in itself, it's going to be just a way to... ICM is only a way to measure your chip stacks equity percentage. So like in this situation, if we are calculating ICM, we are just calculating what a certain chip stack is worth in general. And we can see that, for example, if you are at the big blind, you are probably going to lose money at that hand. So even though you are having 22,000 chips here, your 22,000 chips would not be worth as much as someone with 22,000 chips on the button. But ICM doesn't take that into account. And I would think that would be way more important than taking the blind levels into account. And ace-4 suited, it's just not going to be good enough with the... We are going to be ahead of his range. I think he's shoving 100% here. But the problem is that we are going to require quite a lot of equity in that situation. Our risk premium is going to be quite high. In this situation, we can see that if we are just minusing the $2.5 that the fourth place player gets, we can then build up another bubble situation here, like the first one to bubble gets 80 cents, the second one gets $1.8 and the winner gets then $3.8. So it's like 3.8, 1.8 and 0.8. So we can actually see that it's going to be really close to a 9 max bubble. So that's what we are going to. It's going to be close to a 9 max bubble, but it's going to be less important to get the third place. And Desafinado said the check FGS option. No, like FGS helps in adding some of the. It helps in adding some worth to the position. And in here I min-raised instead of shoving because I think that if there is a player that is multi-tabling a lot, I can hide my stacks. Like if I'm shoving with 3 big blinds, I'm going to get called almost always. But if I'm min-raising, I'm going to get more folds than... And I'm of course going for broke. If there would be like I'm min-raising and there's 3 shoves, then I'm folding. But pretty much when I'm min-raising with the 4 big blind stack, then I'm going for broke against one opponent every time. So Desafinado, adding the future game simulation gets some value to a position, but I don't think that future game simulation would be perfect. And I usually think that the future game simulation is best left on, so usually when you are analyzing a hand, use the future game simulation. And Impact Point asked that does ICM take the blinds into account in its maths? No, it just takes stack size into account. In this situation, it's going to be close with about 5 big blinds. Do I shove or do I min raise? How do I get more folds? And at those situations, we are mainly just wanting to get most folds out of our opponents. And when we are going to be last place on the table, it's going to be more important for us to take risks. Because when we are at the last place, we are not going to get more money by just folding. And it's not going to be even, like it's going to be 80 cents and 1.8 for the next, so... And as we can see in here why it's going to also be really important to finish at the top positions. Like, we can see that the total prize pool is $20.25. But we can see that the first and second place finishers are taking more than half of that prize pool. Schifosis said stop and go. Against a really tight player, I'm a bit unsure that will a stop and go be the greater equity option. With the stop and go, it's going to be another way to increase our fold equity. Like, if we are not going to get folds pre-flop, with stop and goes, we can sometimes get folds post-flop. And in this situation, it's going to be closer than the previous ones. We are having 6 big blinds and we are getting shoved on and queen 3 suited. I'm going to think that this is still a fold, but it's going to be really close. And Skifos, that I figured him to be pretty straightforward. That can be true. I'm going to shove this deuce 4 off, for sure. Like, I'm thinking that the player that has been so tight as he has been, he's going to be folding too often in a situation like that. And let's go for the Hold'em Resources calculator right now. So always first close Poker Stars. Hold'em Resources calculator is not an allowed program to use while you are playing. So, and in general, when you are playing at poker sites, don't use any of these calculation programs because you can get your account frozen and it's not going to be nice. And we got one third place finish. So if we are looking at buy-ins, I don't think that we are even losing that much. Or I think on buy-ins we are probably... This is going to be a bit weird. Like, on buy-ins, if we are looking at buy-ins today, we are like 1 buy-ins down. Doesn't matter. 8 games, 1 third place finish would be enough to cover if you are playing just same buy-in games. And all of these MyC net adjusted, they are going to be bogus for sure. And how do I know it if that is that we didn't get to the final table on most of these, so this MyC net adjusted is going to be completely... You should just throw it out of the window when you see that the MyC net adjusted is moving on games that you are not getting to the final table in. It shouldn't move at all. But let's go to the marked hands. This is going to be an easy hand to look through. And I should have marked more hands because these are going to be probably the most important. And he shoves. I think he's shoving close to 100% here. So let's go to see that if it would be plus EV to call here with Queen 3 suited. And if we are calling with Queen 3 suited, it's going to be... If we are calling with Queen 3 suited, then it's going to be... Then it's going to be for sure unprofitable for our opponent to shove 100%. And we can see that if he shoves just 70%, Queen 3 suited is going to be a call. So I think I made a small mistake there by not calling with the Queen 3 suited. And I'm thinking that our opponent is probably shoving even more than this in this situation. And I'm thinking that's going to be the right default line because if your opponent needs to be calling 49%, it's going to be... And if your opponent is calling less, then it's going to be pretty close to 100%. And I don't need to be a lot tighter. I just need to be not calling like Queen 3 suited, and it goes for our opponent to be profitable to shove almost anything. And this is also something that you need to be aware of with Hold'em Resources calculator. It can calculate you pretty good results if your opponents are playing perfectly, but you should always try to account on when your opponents are not playing perfectly. So let's go for how we are going to go for the analysis. And I think first of all, when we are having just one game, we can go through the game and see like when we have hit the final table. And let's arrange to hand numbers. I'm thinking that we are hitting the final table at around 300, 600. And when you are analyzing these hands, like when you are doing post-analysis for, let's say you have played something like 1,000. Something like 1,000 of these tournaments, then it's not going to be that useful for for coming through the exact moment when you have gotten to the final table. And I think this is the hand that we dropped the Amnesia out. So these hands are going to be the final table hands. And I'm going to export them. And let's have a new folder for those. So we are exporting hands, selecting the first hand that we want and then shift click. So we are selecting all of the hands and then we are just exporting the hand histories. And then we can look through those pretty quickly from hand history files, select files, and there's the 45-man analysis, hand list export. And we can, with the quick analyze, we can then use the price structure of the empty sit and go final table. And as I said, that when you are having something like 1,000 games that you want to look through, it's not going to be that profitable to looking through when you have exactly gone to the final tables. But then you are also having hands to waste, so you can like go through 10 tournaments of when you have hit the final table and look through what is the earliest blind level that you have hit the final table, and what is the latest blind level. So then you can, from the latest blind level, you can from that on select all of the hands and like make them those final table hands. And like when it's the earliest hand, or when it's the earliest blind level, from that and below you can just go mainly for chip EV. And when you are doing that, you are missing all of the hands that are in between those, like first blind level that you are hitting the final table and the last level you are hitting the final table. But if you are having something like 1,000 tournaments to analyze, then it shouldn't matter on. And in these situations, I usually like to take the restrictive all-in filter off, because it can also give you good hands that haven't been push or fold hands, but it can give you good information to look through some hands a bit deeper. And Aristoteles at 0.18% of total prize money. I think it's the prize pool that's still remaining at that point. And impact point, we are having like, I think most of the videos are having some of the HRC material in it. So in these situations, I think that look through the videos, see what you are thinking about the HRC. If you are interested on how you can use HRC for your own games, then of course private coaching is probably going to be the quickest way to learn. But we haven't had like a coaching session that would only concentrate on Hold'em Resources Calculator. And Schifosis, I mean, over 1,000 games of $30 50/50s, I made about 6 buy-ins, so pretty break-even, but my EV adjusted dropped every session. Well, it's variance as well, and the EV adjusted in general, it's going to be more accurate than your results. But sometimes it doesn't work, and I think like on Poker Tracker I should update to the newest version. I'm just afraid that they are breaking something, or then I'm just afraid of the change. But when I'm afraid of that something might break, then I'm usually waiting for a while to see that no one else has problems. Because it takes a lot more of my time if I'm updating to a broken version. And you can always ask during the coaching if there's something that you would like to know about HRC. And for now that I'm having the quick analysis done for the final table hands, I'm not using this like now I'm having to stress about all the hands that are minus EV here. No, that's not what you should do either. It's going to be that you are, from now on, you are concentrating on the hand histories. Like, it's only going to be a filter for you. This quick analysis, it's not going to be the analysis you are doing, like, I'm now putting 100 games in here and I'm just looking on where did I make mistakes. No. You are going through these hands because I think in general going through these hands that you have seemed to make a mistake, it might reveal something deeper in there. And in here we'll then start looking at what is the expectation of HRC for the UTG's range. As Kifos, you still use PT3? No, I'm using Poker Tracker 4, but I'm not using the newest version. I just remember that they are having something that they have done for the MyC equity adjusted or MyC net adjusted calculations. I'm always, when there is an update to a new version, I'm reading if there is something that I could use, and if there is nothing that I can instantly use, then I'm not upgrading. So, like my Poker Tracker is 4.12.1. It's working. I don't generally have any problems with it, but now I see that it's probably having a problem with the MTT sit and goes. So if I would play MTT sit and goes for a living, I would probably update to the 4.13.1. And in here we can see that then Zona Cafetera's range would include the pocket fives that he had here. I'm thinking actually that the range is pretty damn good in here. I'm thinking that most likely opponents are going to shove any pocket pairs even if they wouldn't be profitable. And if we are thinking of, this is also one of those situations. If we are looking at this situation like, this is going to be really good for the ICM and FGS calculation comparisons. Like with future game simulation, for the opponent that's going to hit the blinds during next hand, the range is going to be 3% wider, and when the range is 3% wider, then pocket 8s is not going to be a profitable call. But in here, when it's going to be 15.5 in, pocket 7s would be a profitable call. And I think this is going to be quite close to what I expect an unknown tight opponent to shove at that point. There might be some of these suited hands that are going to be too wide. Schifosis, you ever had troubles with Table Ninja? Yeah. I have had my troubles with Table Ninja, but nothing major lately. So like this is the pocket 8s, this is like the biggest mistake, and I don't think that it's going to be a mistake when we are taking into account that our opponent is hitting the blinds during the next hands and is likely shoving a wider range than the quick analysis would think he would. The Queen 3 is suited, we already looked through it, but this is going to be the main plus point of Hold'em Resources calculator, that it points our attention to hands that you probably should look at. And the Queen 3 suited was a mistake, and it was especially a mistake because our opponent is likely more aggressive than it looked like in here. Then the Deuce 4 off. Oh, this was a situation that our opponent was the big stack, and I think that in these situations we want to use the future game simulation. It's not perfect, but it's better. And in poker in general, you should always think about the situation that even though if you don't have perfect data on something, don't worry about it. You don't need to have perfect data for something for the data to be useful. And Aristoteles now asks, so there is no reason to analyze any hands with Hold'em resources calculated and not from the final table. No. We just started with the hands that are from the final table. It doesn't mean that we are not analyzing the hands that are not from the final table. But the final table hands, they were just easiest to get through at the first point. So we are soon going through the non-final table hands. And the non-final table hands are even more important because like the last three tables are usually consisting of situations that you are effectively less than 20 big blinds deep. And I think that there is going to be plenty of money moving at those situations. And Hold'em Resources Calculator can help you improve a lot on those situations. So in this situation, if our opponent calls 50%, then we can shove only 62%. But problem in this situation is that I don't think that our opponent is calling for 50%. That's going to be the Nash range. And if our opponent is calling 41% or less, or 40% or less, then it's going to be plus EV for us to shove any two cards. And a general opponent, especially as I remember that I had marked this guy pink, I think a general opponent will only call with pretty hands. So the range is something like this. And when a general opponent will call with pretty hands even against a 5 big blind shove, then when we are looking our equity share here, we are looking like, wow, we are getting a lot from any two cards. And this is something that in general I think that people are not adjusting enough from Hold'em Resources Calculator, that how your opponents are really playing compared to how they should be playing. And in these situations it's actually like 45 ments are going to be harder to analyze than some sit and go structures that you are playing more against regs. These are going to be more profitable, so these are going to be more profitable for you to play, but these games are also going to be, even though they are more profitable to play, that there are more random players, it's going to be that what Hold'em Resources Calculator expects that the opponents are playing perfectly is going to be something that's going to be pretty far away from the truth, and you need to adjust on those situations. And now we notice that we got to the final table at 200/400, and because we had just one tournament at the final table, we can only take hands up to 150/300. So let's go to my reports. Let's make the hand report, and then let's add a filter for blinds. No, it should be tournament blinds and antes, and big blind less than or equal to 310. And so now we have all of the hands that are not at the final table. Then we'll export 300 hand histories, and then we are importing. And we can't do this from the same import because we need to use a different structure. And in general we can either use the winner takes it all, or we can have some small adjustment for ICM purposes, so that you are not taking too much risk at the early stages. Probably something like 90/0 would be quite close to what you would expect in these games from the start on. 90/10 or 95/5. And it's going to be more at the last stage and it's going to be a bit less at the early stages. But on average, I think that's going to be quite close to what we would be expecting on average at the 45 mens. Let's go through hands. There should be plenty of hands land. Now I'll need to also add 1 point more. If Hold'em Resources quick analysis finds no mistakes at your game, is it going to be good or bad for you? Now chat should Now chat should have some interesting answers in the future, but generally speaking, I'm happy to see mistakes in here, because it means that I'm also adjusting to some of the situations. So it's always going to be good to see mistakes in these situations. Of course, when we are seeing that there is something like, if we are seeing that there's something that we are having an ace-9 off at the small blind, if it would be folded to us, this would be a horrible mistake to have. But I think it's going to be, if you are just starting out, getting rid of all of the mistakes can be a good thing. But when you are farther away, that you are not just starting out, then it's going to be good to see mistakes in here. And the mistakes are going to be good to see in here because there will be spots that when the Hold'em Resources calculator looks only to shove or fold, but there might be a situation that it's a really profitable min raise. And in this situation, the ace-9 off, let's go to see on how our opponent's range would be. So this is our opponent shoves. And let's see what kind of a range does our opponent need to have here for it to be profitable to us to call with ace-8 off, ace-9 off. 25% is... And let's see, when should the ace-9 off be plus EV? If it's something like 20%, then it's going to be... close. It is actually going to be close. It's like 21%, and I think like people are playing tighter in these games than they should. And I usually like to look at the situations like, how does the range look like? Does the range look like our opponents are in general are doing this? And this is going to be a player that's going to be a random player. And something like 21%, I'm thinking that the random player is likely shoving less than this, and he's likely shoving less of these suited and connected hands. And Rixie, so if you know what you are doing the mistake shows when you play the player. And usually the mistakes are spots that you are differing on the range analysis of that a perfect player would play. Or you are taking a different line than a shove in the situation. And when I'm looking at this hand that was the biggest mistake, I don't think that it's a mistake if our opponent needs to shove 21%. 5-handed. I don't think that it's going to be a 6-handed. I don't think that our opponent is going to be wide enough. This is actually a really interesting hand. I remember that I looked through this hand a lot. And this was the 9 players on the table. There is the really short stack. And on the big blind there is going to be a really big stack. And I believe that this hand is going to be a hand that would be pretty dependent on what is the calling range for the biggest stack. And I think in general, if I shove here, the big blind in the hand will... Actually, this is like 1.5 big blind player opens, and the player that with the big stack is not in the play anymore. And when 1.5 chip stack opens, this is a clear mistake. No matter what, this is a clear mistake, and I should have shoved any ace here. So this is one of those situations. I just remember a different hand when I saw this big stack. And can you replay these hands, please? Replaying these hands is going to be harder, because then I would need to search for these hands at the poker tracker, and that's going to be a bit harder. So it's not going to be as good, but you'll learn to read the hand histories with the Hold'em Resources calculator. But I think for these situations we can actually go for a replayer. And in here, when we don't have the biggest stack player, this has been a mistake for sure. Even though this guy looks to be so tight, this should be a shove every time. I don't get it why I haven't shoved. So this is also good that the Hold'em Resources calculator with the quick analyze, it's going to be brutally honest with you. And this is the Gozzi hand. We can actually, this is also good for Rixie to look like what would be the perfect range for the opponent to. And I'm going to open this up as a basic hand, because I think when our opponent opens for 3x, it's going to be about his range in this situation, and if we are shoving, we are never going to get our opponent to give up. And it's not like when you are having the import, it's not like you are wanting to have a lot of mistakes there, because even playing the player, it's usually some of the situations just get clearer when you are playing the player, but you wouldn't need to. I think that if you are aiming for 0 mistakes in Hold'em Resources calculator, then you are making a mistake in trying to aim to something that doesn't necessarily increase your win rate in the games. So this was the Gozzi, and how often does he need to raise? And this is like 19% only. Actually, when it's 19% only, then I'm going to be too tight in the situation. It was like our opponent is. I'm thinking this is going to be the least, because we saw our opponent playing about 40% of his hands, but it was just 20 big blind. Or 20 hand stack, 20 big blind stack. It was just about 20 hand sample size. So I'm thinking that he's more aggressive than the normal player, especially with his big stack. But I don't think that he's still completely reckless for just 20 hands. I usually want to have more data than 20 hands. And if we are only making him a bit more wider, then the ace-9 off is going to be profitable to shove here. Like, even if we never expect him to fold, and from pocket 3s onwards, I think in game I said like ace-jack off, ace-10 suited, and pocket 6s up. But it seems to be a lot wider than that. It's like king-queen off, king-jack suited, ace-5 suited, any pocket pair, ace-9 off and up. It's actually a really, really interesting hand, and something that I think that's that's a point of leak in here, that if we are thinking our opponent just as more aggressive, it should still be a call here. And then is king 10 suited from middle position. This is going to be like the basic situations. This is going to be a situation that will be something that you are going to be in multiple times in your games. That you are early on. And then it's all about what kind of range can you shove. And when you are looking at what kind of range can you shove, then you are also thinking about how will the average opponents look like in these situations. And I'm thinking that when I'm looking at these ranges that are consisting mostly of pretty hands for the next players, perhaps the big blind is not going to call that wide. But I'm thinking in general people are going to be quite close to Nash at the earlier parts. So I'm thinking that when we are making the blinds a bit tighter, then we can see on what kind of range should we shove in the situation. But king 10 suited should probably be in it. And Rixie asks, so over 0.10 mistakes we don't want ever. Of course we want. We want to have, there might easily be a mistake at the final table that's something like 2 or 3% that's not a mistake. If it's a mistake if you shove and opponent calls perfectly, but probably it's not a mistake if you min raise and your opponent calls not so perfectly. And Kauris said that sometimes little mistakes is the best line to play a hand. We are not aiming to make mistakes. We are aiming to take advantage of certain plays that Hold'em Resources' quick analysis does not look at. So it's not about doing mistakes. It's about doing mistakes compared to the Hold'em Resources' quick analysis. And it's going to be a completely different thing. And I know that it sounds weird, but like the Hold'em Resources quick analysis always looks at the hands that every player has shoved, and as it is a quick analysis tool, it looks with the really imperfect ranges, and it's a great tool to get hands out that you wanna look at, but it's not a great tool to be the only tool to review your hands, and you shouldn't aim for 0 mistakes on that tool, because that game that the quick analysis simulates is not the same game you are playing on the poker tables. And Rixie, I think that's pretty well put out, so it is just good to giving you hands that you should take a look. Yeah, that's what I'm using the quick analysis tool most for. I'm using it to take a look at certain hands. And in these situations we can look, for example, like when I folded king 10 suited here, it's going to be a big mistake. And then I'll know that I'll need to adjust my range to not consist only of king 10 suited, but probably go down to king 8 suited in this situation. And this is what I'm usually doing, and I think this is like king 5 off is going to be... It's going to be a hand that I probably have min raised. No. It's a shove, but I think that it's going to be a profitable shove anyway. On late position we are usually going to be more aggressive. And this is when the UTG raised. We didn't bite it with pocket 8s. It's going to be an interesting hand actually to look at the advanced hand, and we are making that our opponent opens for 3x. And additionally, allow shove doesn't have any use here because I don't think that the Bobby Blondu would ever ever be shoving with those stack sizes. And in these situations when we are using advanced hands to go through something like, so there are 7 players in hand, it's going to take a while. Just get used to it. But for something like this quick analysis, it's probably the quickest tool to get rid of stupid mistakes in your push-fold game, and also it can help you with the min raise or 3-bet game later on. Because usually if you are folding even in the push-fold call game, if you're folding in that sort of situation, you are likely to have big mistakes in your 3-bet game as well, which is a reason that I like to use the quick analysis without the restrictive all-in calculator, because then I'm getting more of those hands that I should look at. And if Bobby Blondie opens 17.3%, I think in general it's going to be tighter. UTG, we are pretty late in the game, our opponent has been tight. So I don't think that from UTG, even with a big stack, our opponent would open with a really wide range. And then we would look like how the world would look after we shove. And I don't think our opponent should pretty much fold any hands to our shove. Opponent actually folds some hands to our 12 big blind shove here. And I think this is going to be pretty much... There will be some hands that he will fold. But I think this is going to be pretty close to what I actually in this situation would shove. It's actually only min raise, so if you are doing stupid things, so when it was a min raise, then I'll need to calculate it all over again, and it's going to take some time. And Definado says that Bobby has a stat of 7% PFR. That's also something that we should look at, like when we are having the hand on Aarnimetsa's calculator, if we find it in here, we can look at what kind of PFR and VPIP did our opponent have in the hand if we replay it on Poker Tracker. And in here we can see that the Bobby was pretty tight, so I don't think that the Bobby would open like what the HRC said, something like 17 to 20%. I don't think that will happen in game. And that's why I think the pocket 8 is not going to be a shove here. But I think it's going to be quite close. I'm still thinking that his range is going to be pretty tight in this position. Probably opening a bit too much of those pocket pairs. It's going to be interesting to see how the ranges are going to move. Like now pocket 8s are going to be approximately at the bubble of it. And then Bobby Blondie should fold some of his range. I don't think that they will fold that much. Then just go for a best response. Actually, pocket 8s would probably have been, even against a tighter player, it would have been a good move. But this is so close. Something like pocket 9s and ace queen plus is going to be probably the profitable range to go against a tight player in general in this spot. But I think this is also one of those hands that I remember in game that I said that this is a nasty situation. There are actually 3 hands that were really good finds with the Hold'em Resources calculator. And as it's just I'd say it's just a stupid algorithm, it does pretty well in getting you hands that you should take a look at. And now we had some extra hands as well, but I think that there were... And then we had one hand that we didn't even think about would be one hand that was a clear mistake. Then there was another hand that was a clear mistake, and it's also a clear mistake on how did I think about the ranges here. So I think the Hold'em Resources Quick Analysis is going to be a really good tool for you to get rid of the stupid mistakes, and I recommend it a lot, but it should not be your only tool to use. You should also always go deeper with these hands and not just go this ace-9 off and then go like... In this situation, I should next go also with ace-8 off and pocket 3s and ace-2 suited, and you shouldn't do that. You should always look the hands deeper than this. And Kauri said HRC is good software but stupid, you need to pay. It's a good software, and if you are playing something like $7 games, you don't need to have a lot of edge gain from the use of Hold'em Resources calculator to make it really good for you. And Rixie says that there is no other way to clear the final table hands from the rest. I think the best way to clear the final table hands from the rest of the hands will be to filter for blind size. And I don't know, like if Hold'em Resources or if Poker Tracker gets fixed, I think you could also try to find out even more final table hands to go for final table hands where the ICM difference would be more than 0 cents, because if it calculates ICM only from the final table, then you should find only final table hands with it. But I think it's going to be better in general to filter with only blind sizes. And the blind size filter it will waste some hands, but in general I think you would get quite good sample of hands if you are just playing more of these games. And this is about the end of it. I think this was a nice 2 hours and about half an hour of Hold'em Resources calculator. And in general this is an interesting spot, because if you are playing 1.5 hours and studying for half an hour, I think you are improving on poker a lot more than if you are just playing 2 hours. Poker is a game that you are improving on it when you are doing your work out of the tables. You can improve some of it on the tables, like you can improve on putting your opponents to a range, and you can improve upon seeing some spots that are profitable to bluff, but all of the equity calculations need to be done outside the table. Table pretty much to get the best results, to learn how to play better. And this is about the time to end today. And on next week we are not having Sunday's sit and go session, but we are on Tuesday we are having English No Limit Hold'em by Ulas Pro, and on Wednesday we are having English Spot Limit Omaha by Kyberi. So We are taking 1 week's break with these sit and go nights, and we are coming back the next week. So hope to see you during the next week, and if you are going to sleep, have a good night. If you are still playing poker, may this be a winning night for you. Bye!